Hello everyone. Today I want to share with you a sad yet inspiring story about a young woman named Lytucan. San was born and raised in a small house nestled in a remote mountain village. Her family was poor, and despite her parents' endless hard work, there was never enough food or clothing. From an early age, she was accustomed to heavy labor, forced to grow up faster than children her age. Hoping her daughter could have a better life, San's mother promised to marry her into a wealthy family in the village. She believed that with a strong and stable household behind her, her daughter would suffer less and not endure the same hardships she had known. But life is rarely as it seems. Following the old belief, parents decide, children obey. San had no choice but to accept an arranged marriage. On her wedding day, everyone thought she was destined for happiness, but behind the elegant wedding dress, her eyes carried a deep and sorrowful weight. Her husband was a wealthy man, but cold and indifferent. He never cared about her feelings, treating her more like a servant than a partner. Her mother-in-law was strict and harsh, scrutinizing every word, every gesture. Even her sister-in-law disliked her, constantly criticizing and belittling her. After the wedding, San gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The child became her greatest source of comfort, the reason she found the strength to carry on. Yet, because she had not born a son, her mother-in-law's cruelty only grew harsher. Day after day, she was scolded for being unable to give birth properly. Every morning before sunrise, San worked tirelessly in the fields. When she returned home, she cooked, cleaned, washed, and managed every household chore. All the burdens of the family fell upon her frail shoulders. But no matter how much effort she put in, she never once received a kind word, only indifference and coldness. There were moments when she longed to visit her own mother, just to sit and talk, to share a simple meal at her childhood home. But even that small wish was denied. Her husband despised her poor family, refusing to visit them and forcing her to leave quickly whenever she did go. Once, she barely had a few bites of rice with her mother before he ordered her to take the baby and return. Tears streamed down her thin face, but she endured it all in silence, too afraid to complain. Days blurred into one another, gray, joyless, and heavy. The smile once on her lips slowly faded away. Only her eyes remained, heavy with sadness, filled with loneliness inside a house that was supposed to be her haven. And yet, deep within her heart, a fragile spark of hope still flickered. She hoped that one day, her sacrifices and patience would soften her husband, calm her mother-in-law, and allow her daughter to grow up surrounded by the love and warmth she herself had always longed for. This morning, like every other, San rose before dawn, when the sky was still veiled in darkness. Along the damp earthen path leading out to the fields, her frail figure moved silently forward, a small basket strapped to her thin shoulders. Inside lay nothing more than a bit of cold rice, enough to fill her stomach after a long day's work. Out on the vast fields, drops of night dew still clung to the young rice leaves, and before the sun had even risen, the cold pierced her hands. Amid the endless expanse of land, her body looked small and solitary. She bent low, calloused fingers gently pressing each rice seedling into the wet soil. Each stalk planted carried a fragile hope entrusted to the earth, the hope of a good harvest, enough to provide her daughter with food and clothing, the hope that her diligence might soften her mother-in-law's harsh words. Through scorching sun or bitter wind, San never allowed herself to rest. Each planting stroke, each splash of mud on her skin was another mark carved onto her life. Beads of sweat fell, mingling with the soft mud, while her labored breaths echoed across the quiet emptiness. People say that a grain of rice is a pearl of heaven, but to Tieu San, every grain was also a tear, an emblem of endurance, and of her yearning for a less painful tomorrow. At times she lifted her eyes toward the faint silhouette of her hometown mountain, blurred in the morning mist. There, in a shabby little house, her old mother still waited for her. The ache of longing rose in her chest, yet Tieu San bowed her head again, pressing on with her work. She knew she could not stop, not with a young daughter who needed her, not with a household to bear, no matter how cold and loveless it felt. The fields mirrored her life, boundless yet lonely, silent yet carrying hidden hope. And there, her small but steadfast figure moved with quiet strength, the strength of a woman weathered by hardship, who clung fiercely to life even as her heart bled again and again. That evening, after a long day in the fields, Tieu San returned home, her body drained of all energy. The smell of mud still lingered on her hands as she hurried to light the stove and prepare dinner. Just then, her sister-in-law entered, her footsteps slapping against the floor, her sharp voice slicing through the air and deepening the coldness of the house. The moment she saw Tieu San, she sneered. "Back so early, huh? Outsiders might think you're hard-working, but really, what do you ever get done properly?" She didn't stop there, complaining, then turning to flatter her mother, endlessly asking for spending money. Her sugary words softened the older woman's heart, lighting up her face with a warmth Tieu San had never known. The two chattered happily, not even sparing a glance for the quiet figure tending the fire. In that house, Tieu San was like a shadow. She did not reply, did not argue, only lowered her eyes and bore the insult in silence. The flickering firelight danced across her gaunt face, reflecting the sorrow deep in her eyes. The place that should have been her refuge was nothing but coldness, favoritism, and neglect. Dinner was heavy with tension. The sister-in-law ate while tossing out barbed remarks, the mother-in-law doted only on her daughter, and her husband sat silently, eating as though none of it concerned him. At the table, Tieu San bent her head, chewing quietly, swallowing not only rice but also her bitterness. That night, after the household had fallen asleep and only the sound of the wind hissed through the cracks in the door, Tieu San sat alone, cradling her little girl. The child slept peacefully, her innocent face like that of an angel, the only light warming her mother's heart. Stroking her daughter's hair, Tieu San let tears slip down, soundless in the darkness. And there, in the stillness of the night, she asked herself, when will these days of humiliation end? When will my life finally know a moment of peace? Just as Tieu San was carrying a basin of laundry toward the well, the house suddenly echoed with her mother-in-law's shrill cries. The older woman claimed her money was missing, the silver she had hidden in a chest was nowhere to be found. Without waiting for anyone to explain, her suspicious gaze immediately fell upon Tieu San. "It must have been you," she shouted. "Who else in this house could it possibly be?" Tieu San froze. Her hands trembled, and the basin nearly slipped from her grasp. She quickly shook her head, voice choked with tears. "Mother, I didn't touch it. I would never dare." But before she could finish, her sister-in-law cut in, feigning indignation. "I just came back, how could I have taken it? Everyone knows she's always greedy for money." The cold accusation struck Tieu San like a blade. She knew well who the real culprit was, but in this house, no one would ever listen to her. Her mother-in-law, already filled with resentment, now had an excuse to unleash even more anger. Rising to her feet, she pointed at her daughter-in-law's face, voice dripping with venom. "So I've been feeding a snake in my own sleeve all this time. A useless woman who does nothing but leech off us, and now she dares to steal under this very roof." Her husband offered no defense. He sat silently, even nodding in agreement with his mother. To him, his wife's words never carried any weight. A crushing tightness seized Tieu San's chest. Her throat burned with words of protest, but no sound would come out. Tears spilled down her cheeks, falling onto the muddy stains of the clothes in her arms. All she could do was lower her head, swallowing back sobs, too exhausted to argue further. In that moment, she felt utterly abandoned. The whole house had turned its back on her. The fragile flame of hope she had carried for so long now flickered on the verge of extinction. Alone by the hearth, she buried her face in her hands. The fire crackled, casting her thin, weary silhouette against the dull gray walls. The sound of wood popping mingled with her muffled sobs, filling the already cold house with an even deeper loneliness. The weight of injustice pressed so heavily on her chest she could hardly breathe. She hadn't taken the money, but no one believed her. Her sister-in-law's lies and her mother-in-law's hatred closed off every chance to clear her name. Her husband remained indifferent, never once asking if she truly was guilty. In that instant, all she wanted was to run away, to scoop up her little daughter and return to her mother's home. Poor though it was, at least there she would find love, her mother's frail arms always waiting to embrace her. But then she thought of those weary eyes, dimmed with age, that fragile figure who waited day after day by the doorway. Tieu San could not bear to add more sorrow, more worry to her mother's heart. So she chose silence once again, hiding her tears behind a forced smile whenever she had the chance to visit. Alone in the kitchen, warmed only by the dying fire, she curled in on herself like a broken branch battered by the storm. The dim glow reflected off her tear-streaked face, and yet, deep in her eyes, a faint glimmer remained, the fragile light of a woman who refused to collapse completely, for she still had a daughter to protect. But where would her life lead from here? Stay tuned to find out in the next video.
Xin chào mọi người, rất vui được gặp lại mọi người trong video của mình. Thì hiện tại nhờ có sự đồng hành của mọi người, kênh của mình đang được phát hành những video về những câu chuyện của người mẹ đơn thân, và đặc biệt là câu chuyện về người mẹ đơn thân Diệu Hân. Và mình rất mong sẽ được mọi người ủng hộ, chia sẻ và giới thiệu kênh của mình để kênh của mình ngày càng phát triển hơn, và mình cũng có động lực để đưa đến cho mọi người những câu chuyện hay và hấp dẫn trong cuộc sống. Thì hiện tại mình cũng rất mong được sự ủng hộ, đóng góp ý kiến từ mọi người, nên là hy vọng ở những video mọi người có thể cho mình một bình luận để mình cải thiện video sau tốt, và có những cải thiện câu chuyện hay hơn nhờ có sự đóng góp của mọi người. Rất là cảm ơn mọi người đã ủng hộ mình trong thời gian vừa qua. Chúc mọi người xem video của mình vui vẻ, và hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong video lần sau nha.